Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to our very first Liberty lesson. This lesson is going to show you all the exercises you need to give your horse a really solid foundation in Liberty work. This is not going to be one of our most exciting videos, but it's going to be one of the most important since moving too fast through these steps or skipping any of them will leave some holes in training later on and will make the more complex maneuvers that much more difficult. So before we get started, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Liberty is, what we're going to try to teach our horses, and how we can use it in our day-to-day training. So put simply, the goal of Liberty is to show our horses that the most comfortable place with the most release for them is going to be with us. In day-to-day training, we use what we call drive, which is a horse's natural response to pressure. Pressure can be anything that's physical, visual, auditory, really anything in the horse's environment that causes them to react and move. So by utilizing that drive, we create forward movement, which we then turn into maneuvers that we use in all different sorts of disciplines: driving, riding, English Western, you name it. So where Liberty is different is we create something called draw, which is the ability to draw our horse to us of their own free will, instead of utilizing this drive that really pushes them away. And pushing them away is not a bad thing. We usually introduce physical connections, so like lunge lines, reins, to help control and develop that forward movement, where Liberty is totally at free will. So by teaching your horse Liberty, you're going to give them this tool that they can then use in your later sessions when you are using drive to ride them, teach them groundwork. You'll always just have that ability to call them back to you if they start to get distracted or nervous. So I use this a lot with my nervous horses. So like Alchemist, prime example, you take him anywhere new and he gets very hot and very disengaged. And so I'll use Liberty to help him tune back into me. It is just really overall a great training tool to solidify the relationship you have with your horse. So for this video, what you're going to need with your horse is a halter. I like to use rope halters. I think they make communication with any pressure on the horse's face a lot clearer instead of just a flat nylon strap. That being said, I don't like the ones with the four ropes or the four rope knots unless your horse and you are accustomed to that, just because they can deliver a lot of information to the horse's facial nerves. If you need something like that to control your horse, I would recommend going and doing reviewing your groundwork before you try these Liberty exercises, just so you know your communication is really clear. So you're going to need your halter, you're going to need a lead line. With this, I would suggest your lead line be at least 8 feet long. If a little longer, 10 feet is my favorite length. 12 feet gets a little bit long for me. But make sure it's a heavy rope so that you have some weight when you swing and give your cues, either visual or physical. And lastly, you're going to need one long whip. In later videos, we'll introduce a second one, a shorter one. But here, you can either use a lunge whip with a lash or just a driving whip. I prefer a driving whip. When starting out horses, please don't eat that, just because I don't have to worry about where this longer lash is and if it's touching them in any way and cueing them in any way that I don't want it to. So with that being said, we are going to show you guys some of these exercises, and I hope you all enjoy.
Alright, so our very first Liberty exercise is going to be leading and teaching our horse to move off of our body instead of pressure from the lead rope. I have my whip in my off hand to encourage him to start with me if he loses focus and ends up a little bit behind. But my main goal here is to have him stop, turn, and even back up a little bit just based on cues off of my body. So I'm going to do some figure eights, which is really basic, but this exercise helps with a lot more than just Liberty. So here we're going to stop, which is good. I'm going to back up. I use a little bit of pressure from the rope because Alchemist is still learning this one. Right there, that's off my body, which is great. So here, correction-wise, if I was to stop and he was to go past me, like so, I would turn my body to him and back him up and then retest So I would go forward and stop, and if he gets the answer right, I'll move on. If he doesn't, I'll keep retesting, backing him up, and asking again until he shows some improvement of his understanding. So we're just going to keep repeating some circles. You can see my lead rope is slack, just to keep reinforcing that he needs to follow my body. Here, I'm going to go and touch him with my whip because he did not start with me. That just keeps him really focused on watching me for his cues. So we're going to turn again, and you can see his shoulder stays behind mine. And we're going to come here and stop. Always offer your horse lots of praise, because with Liberty we really want them to know that being with us is a good thing. That really helps us develop a good amount of draw, which will be helpful later on. So our next exercise is yielding the haunches. This gets a little bit into a very important aspect of Liberty called intention, which is the thought we hold behind any movement or motion we make around our horses. So as I pet him, my intention is to just let him stand still. As I step into his haunches, my intention is to get him to move. And that means I need to be really aware of the energy in my body and how that changes. So here, my rope is very obvious. That is usually how it looks when you're teaching a green horse how to do this. You start to swing your rope, you will probably have to touch them on their haunch, and as soon as they move over, release that pressure. We're only looking for a few steps here. I'm doing half circles with him so that you can really watch clearly on either side, but I'd be happy with just 2 or 3 steps. So here I'm adding a little bit of front pressure on his halter, and that encourages those front feet to stay still. We don't really want those front feet to move. We're just focused on the hinds right now, so if your horse starts to move their front feet, just tug backwards a little bit on their halter. Encourage them to keep those front feet in one place. So next, we're going to move from the haunches to yielding the shoulders. So the haunches just yields the hind end. The shoulder, we're going to be seeing movement in all 4 feet. So here I'm going to go just behind his elbow and swing my rope and release. You can see all 4 feet moving. We're going to go all the way around. I want you to watch that hind leg, the inside hind. See how it crosses? That is super important. If that hind leg isn't crossing, that means your horse is simply walking in a circle around you and is not yielding his shoulders away, which will cause problems in later lessons as we start to develop your Liberty circles. So we're going to do both sides. Exercises always happen on both sides. There we go. That looked good. Good. So here I'm going to add a little more pressure. You can see those front feet start to stick. So I'm going to add a little bit of pressure, and when he really starts to move how I want, I'll release it. So once again, you can see my motions with my rope are pretty obvious. This is what it's going to look like with your horse at first, but with Liberty, our goal is to make those cues more and more subtle. So here, I'm simply going to use my body, once again, my intention, my energy to just walk into him and push him out and away. So there was important. He just got a little confused and tried to keep me on his left side. I'm always very adamant that when I want to be on the left or right side of my horse, that they keep me on the side I want to be on. So next, we're going to desensitize our horse to a whip. Our whip is simply a tool in Liberty to help us cue our horse about which direction we want them to go, how fast we want them to go, when we want them to come, when we want them to stop. So Alchemist is very used to what a whip is. As you can see, he's not really phased at all. If you have a nervous horse, start farther away and just work your way closer and closer, and be very patient with this so that they get to be very, very comfortable. Next step, I call it braving the whip. We want our horses to come towards us with pressure from the whip instead of being driven away. So I always do this on a wall just to make direction of travel very simple. And I raise my whip. Usually you'll have to touch your horse starting out to encourage them to come to you. They'll catch on pretty fast to this. And this just helps them learn how to be drawn into you when they feel that pressure.
So by practicing these exercises, you're going to gain really good control over each part of your horse's body. and you're going to teach them cues that you'll be able to utilize later on when you're working at liberty freely. So it's really important that you go and practice these exercises with your horse until you guys have it totally down. You're probably going to need to practice for you as well as for your horse, so you gain kind of an understanding about how their body flows around you. All of the exercises you just saw, Alchemist is pretty comfortable with at this point because he knows quite a bit about liberty. So don't expect your horse to be perfect right off. I always just look for effort, A for effort, as they say. So just go slow, be patient, and enjoy the journey as you guys learn how to communicate and work together. So that being said, I am super excited for our next video, and we'll see you all next time.